Yeah, we have with us today Mikko, the director of the film, and Jonas, composed the score for the film, and Peter, you're the sound designer, one of the two sound designers. So welcome, and I was thinking of asking you in the beginning, like you, the three of you, started the collaboration for this film quite early on. So I'm curious to hear how it all started. Maybe you want to say something about that, Mikko?
Yeah, I think it's we started early on. That's true, and I mean this is my first film, so there's so many things I had to kind of know how to do for the first time as a director. And one thing was that I hadn't actually worked with a composer, because I mean I've done short films and some of them don't have any music. And one of them had only one song that came from a record, so there was really this process of working with a composer, and we didn't know each other before this, so it started so that we were introduced to each other, and that was in 2020. So we were just talking, so it's quite a long time ago already, more than like 2.5 years ago. And at that time, we had the funding in place for the film, and Denmark is one of the co-production countries, so we knew that we were going to do something here, and I think Peter was involved in that part. And then I heard from Peter that there is a really good composer you should meet, and I remember we had a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
And at that point, it was just like this. I had the script. I knew that there's something going to happen, but really didn't know what. And we needed a composer. That I knew, that this film needs music. This needs a composer. And we had a nice Zoom. But I remember Jonas saying to me that, listen, you cannot decide whether I'm the composer of your film based on my face here in the Zoom. So why won't you send me the script? And I sent you the script, and you were also so kind to offer that you will make some demos, so some sketches based on the script.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think it was Thursday, and next week it was Tuesday, so not that long time ago, I had received this folder of music from Jonas, and it was just fantastic. And actually, I think there is even a couple of themes we ended up using or you used in the film, based on the script, and that was really interesting. But I mean, maybe you can tell more about this.
Yeah, I remember that Skype session, and usually I would love to do the score if the director's into some of my ideas, and so as Mikko told, I usually read the script, and as like you read a novel or a book, or there's a lot of things that comes into your mind, and try to go to the piano and play some stuff, and what comes into your mind about the characters or emotions by reading the script. And I remember this two of the themes that I sent for you as demos. I usually do that because then you can find out if the marriage is good from the beginning. If the director enjoys what you're doing as one of the first sketches, then you might have a good work relationship, because you work together sometimes for 2 years or 1 year. So it's very important that you're the right composer for the right film. Yep. So instead of, yes, I got the job, I try to, it's like you go to apply for a job and sending these sketches. And I always do that to find out, just to use 2 weeks or 3 weeks to find out if it's the right job and the best match for both of us. And this was one of them, one of the good ones, I think.
Yeah. And how was your introduction to the film, Peter? How was your first meeting with Mikko or the manuscript? Or
we actually met at a kind of script workshop.
Yep.
What was it in
In Sardinia.
Yeah, in Sardinia, of all places, where there's something called Torino Film Labs. They have this workshop where they, like, they select a few scripts that is then developed with different consultants, and I've been a consultant there for a few times, because I think that great sound design starts already at the script stage, just like Jonas is talking about, that the music starts very early on. And the thing about sound is that as soon as you start talking about sound, then things become more based on atmosphere, or you have to talk about what the feeling is in the film. What is the atmosphere? What is the feeling? What is the vibe? How is this film gonna feel? And it's not just about words or dramaturgy or like plot points. It's really about the feeling of the film. And I remember reading this, and then I think our meeting was next to a swimming pool or something very exotic, and we were sitting there, and it's kind of like very warm, and you're talking about this script that's all about winter time and like the sound of snow and the quietness of like the fragility of like nature and so on. And it was just like this very special story, and it was just immediately just got all these, like, in a way, like visual sounds inside of me that at that point I wasn't like, I didn't know that I was going to be working on the script later on, on the film later on, but we just like started talking about ideas, and I just suggested some different ideas to Mikko. And then later on, suddenly, like, Mikko apparently, for some reason, enjoyed that session. And then we kept the contact, and then we set up this whole co-production thing where we started this collaboration, and I introduced Mikko to Jonas and so on. So it was for me, I love reading scripts this early, because it can then start your imagination, and you just get all these ideas that are like abstract, weird ideas, but also just like things. For me, this film is in a way a poem. It's abstract and beautiful, but also very moving. And for me, it had so many layers to it. So by being a part of it like that early, then you have the time to kind of get into that vibe and get all these different impressions. And then Mikko had a Finnish sound designer that he had worked on before, and we just like set up this thing where we did the sound design together. So Jorma did a lot of the stuff in Finland. I did some things in Denmark. And then we met in the mix, and I was then also kind of like trying to make it so that sound and music, the sound from music, kind of were that we were collaborating closely, and that like Jonas and I also met several times, just the two of us, to kind of like listen to some stuff and bounce ideas. So there's this whole thing about like really collaborating early, but also communicating all the time and sending things back and forth. And Jorma did this amazing work, and he brought then his work to Copenhagen, and we mixed the film there like a year and a half ago. Or something like that.
Yeah. I'm also curious about, in this early phase, to me, when I see the film, it's a film where there's a lot of space for the sound design and the music. It's not a film with a lot of dialogue. Did you have an idea of that already, Mikko, when you wrote the manuscript, or when you read the manuscript and were thinking about the music and the sound? Did you have this perception of space for that, or what was your, thoughts?
You mean when I was working on the script? No, I wasn't thinking like that. Because my background is completely in writing. I'm a poet and I'm a screenwriter, and then I studied directing as well, and I've done short films. But for me, everything is about the script. It's in a way, it's like it's for me it's a piece of literature in a way. I write it as, I mean, I know how to do, like there are restrictions how to write a script, and you should do that, like, because there's things you cannot write. But it's very important that it works somehow on its own. And I actually like meeting both of them. I kind of, now to think of it, it was the script in a way that was the launching point, rather than me as a director, because I mean I wasn't a director because this is my first film, so how can you? I mean, you can see on short film, but so it's the script, that the way how I communicate, most of all, and then any script, how no matter how it is written, when you start to direct it, you have to completely redo it because there's no way it transfers as it is. So it's more like searching the way to use the cinematic language, maybe in the same way that is the atmosphere in the script. So this is exactly like when from the first sketches that Jonas made, because there was a couple of things that were very like important for the music early on. I think the only thing we discussed was that you asked like what kind of music I would like in general, and I said that something really vague about that. I kind of like the old scores. I like the old scores that they used more melody, these melodical themes.
Signature themes.
Signature themes, exactly.
Old school.
And I think you kind of liked that idea, so it was not like you didn't reject it.
No. I remember reading the script, and I imagined this dusty sawmill and the machines, old rusty, dusty machines. And that was some of the first sketches I did, kind of machine by hitting a water phone or something weird. And then you have this character, Pepe, and I wrote this simple piano melody, Pepe's theme, that was quite naive, and it was in the folder, I think one of the folders first.
Yeah.
So we have this kind of more experimental, dark stuff, and then we have this childish, melodic stuff as well. And it was fun from the beginning.
And also, I remember we also talked that, you said in the first meeting that based on maybe it was the second one, but based on the script you read, you said that you don't want to use music to use in the way of humor. I mean, because there is humor in the film, and there was also in the script, but that was also, I think it was very important, because that could have steered the film into a very different direction.
Yeah.
And also, this meeting with Peter for the first time was the same, because it was a sound meeting in that sense that you were the sound consultant, but actually it was a workshop where there was like different sections of filmmaking, like directing, and there was no script meeting per se, but actually it was one of the best script meetings I had with this. It was the way Peter read the script, and you were able to communicate about the things that you learned from there, and that was really good for me as a writer, because I was still working on the script. So in a way that also, I mean, that's just me how I work, but I mean that for me the script is very important. But at the same time, you need to kind of throw it away when you're making the film, because you have to do it again.
And I would say one of the most important things for me as a composer is to get into the things very early on, is to avoid temp music, other composers' music put into the editing room, and you have to be a copycat and do what the directors and the editors fell in love with, this kind of temp music. And it's like hell to kind of copy that. So it's much more interesting as a composer to put yourself into the characters and what you're reading from the beginning of the process, I think.
Yes,
and you told me also, Jonas, you told me, Mikko, that you actually succeeded with that, because many composers, I'm also a composer, we really... Many of us like that we can make the sketches early, and then there will be no temp music in the editing phase, or almost no temp music, but it seemed like it actually worked for you.
Yeah, in this case, or the last 10 years, I've been working like that only. Also with TV series and more commercial stuff, that's the way to go, because you get your identity and your signature into it, and you can say if they don't want your sound, they could find somebody else.
And it's also that because that was also for me, it was one of those like new things I didn't really think of. And I remember that you were very stern. You said that no temp music. When you start edit, don't use any temp music. And I was a good boy because I was taking the advice. But I think it's that at that point, everything is so, it's kind of stressful, and you are, as a director, you are with the material and you start to edit, and you are really afraid that is this going to be like completely disaster and everybody's going to hate me or what. I mean, it's very stressful. And then you start to edit, and the editor, they usually, I mean, of course, they are doing their job, so they need to. It's hard to edit without music.
Yeah, they need the music.
They need the music, and that's usually what editors like in this case also ask that. So we need music to see if it works.
Yeah.
The scene. I mean, maybe we have to cut the scene away.
Yeah.
But so that's where you start to go to your like collections of your favorite music and use it, and that's a problem because the music is so big part of film. So in any film where you actually use score music, it really affects everything. So if you, I mean, if you use another music, then actually the whole editing is based on that music. The rhythm, the length of each shot and everything, even the way you use, because I mean, we all know that if you listen to this kind of music, if you listen to Beatles and you watch this one shot, it can feel very good. But if you have a different shot with that song, it's not so good anymore. So it affects everything. And even the VFX artists, when they were making because there's some of these, the burning car and the electric sphere that comes, so they asked that, can we have the music? And when they listened to your sketches, what we had and that, it was almost the final, I guess, and they said that it affected their work. So I think that's the only way. Like after this, I'm never going to use temp music. But actually, the only time we didn't obey your rule was the organ.
Yeah. That was funny. You have to tell the story how you found
because that was
organ.
Because the editor used only your music because we had it. Yeah. And then he said that, we need the organ for these scenes where they are at the, like it's not church, but this place where the psychic singer is performing, and we can see that she's playing, and sometimes she's raising the hands, but still there is organ music, and we didn't have, and I think I asked, but somehow something happened, I don't know. And then he just went to YouTube and he found this one guy who had played with the Hammond organ and doing some crazy stuff. Yeah. And we used that as a temp music.
He was just trying out a Hammond organ.
Yeah, it was like a YouTube
demo. Yeah, and you put it on the film.
Yeah, and this is what what you have in the final film as well. At some point, I mean, I think, but I always thought that it's a temp music, we're just gonna do something else for that. But we were quite advanced in everything, and we had like everything was, but still we were using that temp music for this.
It's so great.
And then you said that there's no way you're gonna do something like this.
No, it's unique
because it's so crazy. It's not like there's this vibe that you actually, it's hard to get.
Yeah.
And then so I had to call the producer that, can you find, there's this YouTube nickname there, can you ask if we can use it? And if you know anything about like music rights in cinema, it's not so easy. But luckily we got in contact with the person and it was okay to use the music. We paid him obviously, but
yeah. Well, I was curious if you actually tried to remake it, but you didn't.
No. It was too.
Yeah. And were you following all this, Peter? Were you sending sounds back and forth with Jonas in this process? There was also another sound designer. So what was your?
I think like during the picture edit, it was mostly music. It was like music was the focus, and also because there's something about this film where like it feels like, well, it's not a musical, but the music is such an integrated part of everything. Like it just feels like everything moves in rhythm to the music. So it felt like when the music kind of found its place, then you could start building the sounds around that. Because the music was in there so early, then you could do all these things where pitch shift and ambience so that it fits with the tonality of the music, or you create a rhythm with a background sound that works with the music, and And when we started the proper sound editing, then, I mean, for example, when we had a meeting with the Foley artist, and usually when you do Foley is like the sound of the characters, like footsteps and like putting down a glass and opening a bottle and these things. And usually when the Foley artist does those sounds, then it's all about looking at the picture and then kind of like making them in sync and kind of making sure, okay, so every footstep is right. But for this, we actually directed him so that, like, to listen to the music and make the Foley sounds so that they fit with the rhythm of the music instead. So everything was really built upon the music. So that also meant that the structure of the sound editing was also like made around the music.
It's orchestrated on top of the
exactly.
music.
Yeah.
Like a red light.
Yeah, exactly.
Scene.
Yeah.
And you mentioned yesterday, Mikko, when we talked that the sound actually make the rhythm for the whole film to you. That it was actually like the...
Yeah, because this is something I kind of discovered while, not only recently when I was watching the film. I didn't think of it that much when in that way when we were doing. But actually, like, because like you said that there's not that the whole narration is, there's not that many edits, and the blocking is so there are long shot, like these pictures that take a lot of time. And actually it's kind of strange if you watch this when we were editing and watching the material without any sound, any music, and we were actually like at some point thinking that is this gonna be too slow, and is it gonna be like flat in the rhythm in a way? But
too ambient and drone.
Yes, something like that. Yeah. But now when I was watching, because I mean somebody was commenting the film, it was in a festival, and talking a lot about the rhythm of the film, that it's so nice and like the rhythm. But I was thinking that it's actually the sound that makes the rhythm most of the time, because I mean. Because the way it is blocked and the way the cinematography, because we didn't, there's not so many close-ups, and usually you can build the rhythm of the pictures in a way, but here there's so much room for this sound, and actually the sound has to, I mean, sound is so important in film in many ways, but there it has to carry some of the tension in the scene as well, and that of course has a lot to do with music, but also with the sound design. And that was quite interesting. I mean, I haven't thought of it that, but it's just like, I think it's I don't know. I mean, for me it's hard to say because this is my first film. But sometimes we tend to overlook the sound. I think that's because film is such a visual, but it's like I recently noticed that every time when I watch a rough cut, and when I see the film like premiering, if it's like a friend of mine who's making the film. The difference is so huge. It's like I don't like the rough cuts usually, but I like the final product. But the only thing is the sound is the biggest thing, the difference.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Mikko, that you have a background in poetry, and that you could maybe watch the whole film as some kind of poem. And I'm curious as to what that meant for you, making the music and making the sound. Did you also perceive the film as a poem, or what did that mean to you?
It was the script was very open and abstract, but it was only until the first big draft or editing lasted a long, maybe 2 hours, that we got that I discovered, okay, wow, this is like a tone poem. There's music all through that tells a lot of the story. With the dark choir, and there's a lot of space for music and sounds, and there's almost no dialogue. I didn't get that until I saw the first rough edit. To be honest.
Yeah.
I think I was actually thinking about it all the way from reading the script the first time. I'm not sure I told that to Mikko, but like. Usually when I read scripts and then try to think about sound, especially like when being like consulting on scripts, I find it sometimes nice to actually, I mean, if I receive sometimes I ask for the script to be delivered as a document, and then I remove all the dialogue, and then I just read the scenes without the dialogue just to see so what is this film? What is actually going on in this film, which is not about the spoken word? But when you read the script for this film, there's so many scenes that have very, very minimal dialogue. So this was never like, it was so much about atmosphere from the beginning. I'm not sure I was thinking like this is a tone poem or something like that, but more I found it like really inspiring to meet a scriptwriter who was so much into like atmosphere and things that are unsaid, because a lot of scriptwriters find it like are really focused on, okay, all the lines that are being said and every word should be right, and like, okay, so they like everything should be said in words so that we're sure that the audience knows exactly what's going on. And this is quite the opposite, and I just found it so liberating, and that's, for me, that's super inspiring in itself. But it takes a lot of courage, I think, to write like that, even though Mikko might not see himself as a brave filmmaker, but it's actually like, that's my experience from reading a lot of scripts, that sometimes you can almost hide behind the words in a way that if you put a lot of lines of dialogue in the script, then you're sure that everybody will understand it. But it's actually often more inspiring to, especially as a collaborator, to kind of think about, okay, so what are the emotions of this? And that was very inspiring from the beginning of this film. And then, then the thing about this process was also that, one thing was that we were part of the process very early, but also that the creative process just kept on going. We kept on getting new ideas until the very final day in the mix. So it wasn't like, okay, now we planned everything out, now we know what's gonna happen, and now we just do the sounds for the next 4 weeks or something like that. No, it's like the creative process just kept on evolving, and we just kept on getting ideas, saying the four of us, Jorma and the three of us in the mix, in the final mix, and kind of like, okay, I have this idea, let's try this, and how about that? And like, it was very inspiring, a very inspiring process.
And on that note, I was also curious about, because you have mentioned, Jonas, that the choir, which is quite prominent in the film, it was an idea that came in quite late. In the whole process.
I wrote this theme early on and hummed it together with my assistants. I think it was last December that I spoke to Peter, and we found out that we talked about this great singer's theater of voices with Else Torp. Peter has worked with them on Johan Johansson's movies, I think.
Last and First Man.
Yeah. And we got this idea that could we get these great singers on board instead of us doing the mumbling stuff. And it was a great decision. And actually, we succeeded to have them into the studio, Medley Studio here in Copenhagen, and singing these parts, and it was amazing because it's a really international choir, this high standard choir, and it became, you have this as a kind of dark forces against Pepe, the dark forces from the woods, and there's a lot of pressure on Pepe. And I remember, do we dare to put this in the beginning of the movie as a grand opening, almost like a Morricone Western movie or something? And that was a turning point that we go for this. It's not a Nordic emotional melancholy stuff, but we go for the big payoff in the beginning of the movie. That was very interesting, and it was in the end of the, as Peter said before, it developed all through this, a lot of phases that we discovered. We can do this and this. We also had this horn player playing the horns, flutes, and so the red light when Pepe goes and see the red light at the barber this horns played there. It was amazing to me as a composer to have that kind of musicians on board.
Yeah. And I know there's a clip from the studio with the choir. I don't know if you want to show that now.
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah.
It's a year ago we had this recording session, and you can see them. The conductor, he conducts Woodcutter theme.
Shiny, happy people.
Yeah.
Yes. And Mikko, how did you first perceive this idea that came in quite late with the choir that Jonas presented to you?
I remember he was a bit frustrated about something, and he said that we're missing something. There's something missing, and it's almost there, but something is missing, and you couldn't like put your finger on it. What was it? And then you said that you want to have like a choir or a human voice, and you were playing out that. And I mean, I thought that just like in a simple way that it sounds good. I mean, he knows what he's doing, and
There's a lot of trust in this guy.
But I had a trust. I had a lot of trust for you. But I really didn't like. I didn't see the difference. But this is also something that I understood like now But I think at that point as a director, you are so exhausted. I mean, it's almost impossible to actually understand all the nuances and everything. But that's the thing about directing, is that you really have to trust the people you are working with, because I mean, if you try to do this micromanagement for everything, it usually ends up being a very bad film.
Yeah.
So, but later on, I like the idea, like intuitively, I think that was something. It made it more like grand, and usually I think like using choir in film is like it's a bold thing, but in this film, because I was going into this like a mythical tale in a way, so it's not realistic, and it tries to go like quite deep, even though it's plays out as it is. But so for me it made like rationally it made sense. But now when I have been watching the film like completely with an audience, I think it's like what I found very emotional is that because I wanted the acting to be so laconic. So actually I'm portraying human beings not in a psychological realism way. So it's like they are more like these, they seem to be human, but there's something missing. And it's very Finnish in a way, and it's like over-exaggeration of the Finnish way of communicating. So it's based on something real. But what it does to me is that with these human voices, it becomes more like human, the whole film. And this is something I didn't think of that time, but it's like more now when I'm watching it. So it was actually a very, I think it was a very like a sensitive thing you had in your mind as an artist to in this film to use that. Because what it does to me. I mean, I think it in a very simple way, because I mean, hearing these human voices, and sometimes it's very, they get depressed and they don't even move. But you have this human voice. The contrast is what makes it emotional.
And it's dark, melancholic stuff for a comedy. So you have the scoring goes against the story.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
And all three of you, you've been talking about this continuous collaboration and creativity, and you mentioned also, Peter, in the end when you were mixing the film that you actually also, Mikko, asked to take a lot of sound away, so there was less sound, and maybe the sounds were more prominent, those that were. Can you elaborate on that?
Often when you do, I mean, like, the thing about filmmaking is that there's so many kind of rules and cliches that no one wrote them down, but you're kind of like if you're in a bar, you have to hear people in the bar talk quietly, and there has to be a fridge somewhere, and then there's a sound of like some noisy lights and all that. You kind of build out, like with the sound of film, you often build out the spaces. That's something that I'm used to doing. It's kind of like a convention, even though I love experimenting and so on. There's these kind of like traditions that there's a like, okay, you have to do it like that. Okay, we fill out the space, and then it sounds good, and then everyone will feel comfortable like watching the movie. And it's like we know it, and it's a little bit of a disease somehow, and somehow you need to get pushed a little bit and kind of like, okay, so Peter, maybe this is not the film where like everything is just conventional like you're used to. And we did a lot of sound design like on this film throughout the process, and like there was a lot of experimental stuff in there already. But the thing about the mix was that we found that like Mikko kind of came to me and said like, okay, but we need to kind of make things more bare. Like we don't need those sounds to kind of, this is not that kind of movie. You don't need to kind of stuff things around the characters. The characters are powerful in themselves. The situations are abstract, poetic. It's more like, it shouldn't feel real. It should feel otherworldly in a way. And by giving me that push, then like Jorma and I kind of like, okay, so how about taking away this and then only having maybe one sound instead of 20 sounds in the background. And it just became so much stronger. And the film, which has still a lot of sound in it, but it became much more precise in a way. So that like, okay, so here we hear that sound, here we have that sound, we hear that sound. And every sound has much more of a personality now, instead of like layering a lot of things on top of each other, which was like the first mixing pass. Usually when I'm in the mix, like I like to kind of do a first pass of the film to kind of feel, okay, so this is kind of the foundation of the sound of this film. And Mikko was so good at kind of like inspiring us to kind of go away from the normal style of sound and kind of go into this style where the sounds tell a certain specific story instead of just being there for kind of nurturing the audience in a way. And that was another thing that really developed through the mix, and which also became very clear in some of there's sequences in there where there's so much music and there was a lot of sound, and we needed to be very specific about, okay, so what story are we telling when? And it became like a much more precise mix and very kind of like minimal and powerful at the same time.
And I know, Peter, that you have chosen some clips. I don't know if you might want to show one or two of them, and also something to listen to.
Yeah, but maybe like the clip number 2, which is the beginning of the second the second chapter of the film, would be a nice one to play. There we can hear. I did a bounce of like you hear we have a full mix, and then you can hear the music on its own and the sound on its own. So maybe we should play those 3 clips. That's clip number 2, and then full mix, and then music, and then sound. Then we can hear the layers.
Thank you. Maybe tell us a little bit more about how you collaborated on this scene, the music and the sound design.
Yeah, so this, I mean, also when you hear it like this, and you can really hear how like all the sounds are built around like the music, and so you have the choir that has all these that has this tonality and the rhythm, and then the sounds kind of like are built so that they fit with that, and I mean all the way to the microwave that has the right tone and the pling, and the boss that comes in and has the right tonality and rhythm with the end of the music and so on. There's quite a lot of sounds that you don't even really hear when it all plays together, because it feels like it's almost just like one piece of music. But at the same time, this was actually like, when we... the first time Jorma came to Copenhagen for when we were doing like workshops together, all the four of us, this was one of the very first sequences. We were sitting in my studio and just putting on some sounds and kind of trying to find out, okay, so what can we do with sound in this film, and like how should this sound? And I just felt that for me this was something where you can be quite abstract, but at the same time it had to have this gritty feel of reality. So it's kind of like, it's gritty analog sounds, but it's played in a way where it feels abstract, but it's quite organic. I mean, and I think that goes for the whole film in a way. It has this tactile thing where it feels very analog in a way, but the things we do are often quite crazy and experimental in a way. And that actually came from like just Mikko, Jorma and me sitting together in my studio just trying out some sketches, and it was just this feeling that, wow, we can do a lot of crazy things in this film. And it just felt like this fits well with the whole like feeling and vibe and environment of the film.
And what was your take, Jonas, as a composer for this scene?
I remember I just sent the music, and the editor placed it and built this. I hadn't expected Peve to be smiling in the snow to this kind of dark shit. So that was quite surprising for me. Regarding music, we have used a lot of gritty old school instruments. We have on this Martineau, we have clavioline.
You have to explain what on this Martineau is.
On this Martineau is a kind of synthesizer from the 30s. It was invented in the 30s. And we have clavioline, which is a monophonic synth from the 50s. So we have a lot of old school weird instruments. Of course, piano, the organ stuff, the woodwinds, some cello stuff, the choir, of course. But it's most of this. Maybe you have one Moog synthesizer on the scene where he sings Ikava, but it's very old school music instruments and more organic instruments in this score. There's no 80s synths so it's a bit old school, gritty, dark, organic textures in the music as well. Classical stuff.
Yeah. And how you say, Jonas, it was the editor who you had made some music and the editor put it on. And I'm curious, Mikko, if you remember when you first time saw this scene with this music in the editing phase. I don't know if you remember.
I think I'm not sure if it was early on with this music. I think it
was a bit late.
Yes, we were playing out with the cue points. But that was the thing, because the editor, when we started editing, we had the sketches and you were like constantly creating music and reacting to the edits, like when we send out now there's a new version, and then you could like polish, because we used just something from the folder. Maybe what happens if we put, and this was exactly the thing, like, okay, there is this dark choir, this is really powerful. What if we put it in the like the beginning of the second chapter? I mean, it doesn't like it doesn't fit there, but let's see. Then you create something, and that's the beauty. And then you can polish and make it like whatever we use.
It's great with these kind of accidents where you go against what you normally do.
And that was also what we did in your studio those days when I was there. So let's try. What happens if we because the film is kind of crazy, so you can. There's no like.
There's no rules.
There's no rules, and you can say that it doesn't fit because how can you say something like that? And but I think from watching these clips now, it's like because it works in all three of them. I mean, I think what we ended up using is the best. That was a good thing that it still feels like that. But if you look at with only music, it's like a silent film, and it's like really it goes like really mythical. But then when with the sound, obviously, it's more rooted in the realism, and that was the thing because I mean, in a way, the tone of the film is magical realism, so it has to be. We cannot go completely to the mythical. Then it would be a different kind of tone. So it has these elements of. And it was also when we were making the film because obviously we cannot and we didn't even want to control everything. It's still like it's set up in this dreamlike time, but maybe it's still nowadays, and it's like just things are just restricted in a way. So that's quite good example of how it's very different. The whole scene is completely different. With music or without music.
Yes, definitely. It was really nice to see all these three versions. It's quite informative and beautiful in their own right, all of them. Yeah. I think we could talk on and on about this, and we will, but we will also now open up for questions, because I can already see there is a question here.
I'd like to ask, does it have any title in Finnish, the film?
The question is, I'm just repeating if it has a title in Finnish.
Yes, the Finnish title is the same. It's the Woodcutter Story.
But why not the story of Job?
It could be that because I mean this is based on the book of Job.
Yes.
I mean that was not my initial idea was not to make an adaptation of that, but when I started to write this script. Because this was based on this actual woodcutter I met, and he was very similar than the main character, and so it made me to like go when I started to write it. I started to think about the Book of Job because I had the same kind of structure, so I started using it on my own purpose. But still at the same time I felt that this is actually the same thing in a way because it's about like about this possibility of hope in a way, but not in a religious context.
Yeah. But I see it as a very Catholic film, actually. But I think it's obvious that you are very fond of American movies, American cinema. I mean, I really see Scorsese, Taxi Driver, and I see also Coen Brothers, Fargo, and of course David Lynch. I mean, But I'm just a bit confused. There's 2 acts in the film. Why not a third? Doesn't a story always have 3 acts?
Yes, but I think it's a bit different. I mean, they are chapters because I still think you can find the 3 acts in any story in a way, but because I mean here there are still 3 acts if you want to analyze it that way. But I wanted to make it more like use the structure in a way like as a theater play because there is always an intermission, so there are like two equal sides, like chapter 1 and chapter 2 in that sense. Or maybe like a novel could have this kind of structure as well. So I didn't want to do it like a completely normal.
And just one last thing, I really like the film and I really get it, except for the beginning. I don't understand the beginning. What is going on?
the beginning, the prologue.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, the film doesn't explain it, so it's okay to be confused. But I think it's if you think like what happens is that there is a deal being made, and so there are these 2 kind of strange people, I would say, meet up in this cabin. So it's not like a place where you would actually have this kind of meeting. But that comes also from the Book of Job, because in the Book of Job it's God and Satan. They place a bet on the soul of this man, and it's about these 2 powers that are in this battle about this one particular person. And it's what she says in the beginning also, that this will affect all the good people, and it will be really horrible. So it's like, it's hard to explain, and I don't want to explain it, but it's this it's like a Faustian deal. I wanted to have this kind of opening, and it's also in a way it's the circle of the story in that. So because he is climbing up the mountain, and in the end we are climbing up the mountain. So that's also one way to close a story in a way. But it's not that I don't think it has to be something like completely explainable.
No. And love is always a car wreck.
We have one more question up there.
I was just wondering if you used any of the music or the sketches you made when you were filming on set.
That's a question. Yeah, there's a question of any of the sketches of the music that Jonas made beforehand were used on set.
No, we didn't use it in that sense, because I mean, like, I have heard these stories about Sergio Leone using this Morricone score in the Good, Bad and Ugly on the set. I don't know, is it true? We didn't do it like that, but obviously I had listened to that music. So I knew the tone, and I remember thinking of the Pepe's theme when we were doing, because so there's this scene where he's walking, like this side tracking shot when he's walking. So I was like thinking, like, I'm gonna use the who knows, but like we're gonna use that theme here. So I ended up doing quite a long take because I knew that I want to keep like a room for the music.
Yeah.
So that in a way it really affects everything what you do.
We used the Ikawa track. It was a backtrack. He's singing. This character.
Yeah, the Ikawa is the song that the psychic singer is singing in the end, and that was an old Finnish pop song from the 90s, and that was in the script. I wanted to have it because of the lyrics. The lyrics are so. I was so fascinated by the lyrics. It's not like it's like a philosophical pop song. It's kind of strange, but I absolutely love the lyrics, and so I asked Jonas to do the backing track for that, and actually we ended up using the actor. He's singing himself, and we ended up using the live record. So that's what he actually sing in front of camera. So it's not like we didn't do it in studio.
We did a version just with the harmonium and a click track, and he was singing live to that. And afterwards we got the choir, and a lot. We could build like a musical moment afterwards during the sound design session. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? We have time for it. We also have. I don't know if there are some questions for the people from online. Yes, but no. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the film. You talk a lot about the tone of the film, which is it's weird but very, very nice. When did you develop the tone or the atmosphere? Is it before you have the script, or is it kind of worked along the way, or when do you work on that?
There's a question about when in the process the tone of the film was developed. Is that rightly understood? Yeah.
Well, it was in the script. How it was written. Like Peter also was remembering this our first meeting, and so there was. I think it was that it is very visual, and there was not that much dialogue. And actually, we ended up cutting away some of the dialogue. We even shot, so it's even less dialogue than it was in the script. And but like the way they speak, that was in the script. So that was kind of like. That was really like how, if you think of the tone of the complete film, it builds up on like one stage and after another. And because the script was written like that, and I really didn't think how to make it as a film. I just thought that this is a text and it should be like this. And then of course I start to collaborate with the music, and that starts to feed it. And then I start to collaborate with the actors when I did the casting. And the actors, we tried out to do can we play out with the dialogue, do it maybe in a bit different way, maybe more, if they speak a bit more normal or something like that. But actually, pretty early on, the actors also felt like, they said to me that, no, you shouldn't change it, because we are losing something, and I felt the same. So we decided to keep the quirky way of speaking, and then I had to think with the cinematographer, okay, if they are talking like this, how how can we block it? Like, I mean, I wanted them to be not really reacting and be very laconic, and there was something that draw me into that. So then we had to think about the cinematography, because you cannot just go there and shoot it like as you like. It really matters. Everything affects everything. So that's how it like. But I think it was for me the main thing was that how to keep the tone of the text and how to do it kind of like transfer it into the cinematic language, and because I think because I'm a poet, so I think it's like two things that it does to a person if you're a poet, is that you don't mind the ambiguity. Things can be unexplainable. That's why I read poetry, because I read it and I don't know what it is, but it's like it's completely crazy, but I feel that I can still feel it in a very powerful way. And the other thing is that we are using language. That the language is so important. We are actually using the language in trying to reach something that is actually beyond the language. So, and if it would be something that I can clearly say and state out, then it wouldn't be a poem anymore. It would be just something I can just say. So it's the same thing with cinema. And sometimes I don't understand why, because cinema is so, it combines all the arts with the sound and with the music and with the images and the acting. And so it's a very powerful tool, and it's a very powerful tool to use as a poetry. But I mean, but I don't know. It's still not like there's risks. Let's say like that. But I mean that's why I'm a poet. I cannot strip that away from me. So
yeah.
So that's in a way the tone is also something I tried to do with the same thing in a cinematic way, but it's very hard to explain why.
Thank you. More questions? Yeah, a few over there. Yeah, on the back first, maybe. Yes.
I really like the film, and especially the scene in the car with the brilliant. How much time did you spend doing sound design? How long? How many days?
There's a question about how long time you spend on the sound design. Yeah.
I think it was like 3 months spread out, like for the editing and the mixing, wasn't it something like that? But then spread out also a little bit, like we did the workshops and so on. I think something like that, where Jorma had a dialogue editor, and our Foley artist was German, and I was in Copenhagen, and so it was like sending things back and forth. And because we did all these kind of like workshops and met up here and there, sometimes it can be hard to kind of like say, okay, so this was. But I think like something like 3 months or something like that. I think it was about that. We mixed for 2 weeks, and the Foley was done in, I think, a couple of weeks, a week and a half or something like that. So yeah.
Thanks. And another question just in front of that.
I really enjoyed the film, and also I really enjoyed the soundtrack. So something you mentioned about using more classical instruments, maybe older, synthesized from the 30s and the 50s. So I just kind of wanted to ask, what's the inspiration, going this kind of direction with the soundtrack?
Yeah.
I think
You have to.
Yeah, it was just, sorry, it's for the online users. There's a question about how you chose the instruments for the soundtrack. Yeah.
I think we had a scene like this barber killing when he hits the axe through the door. It was like it would film. It was like a B film, a clumsy B film. I don't know. It inspired me to look at this as it. We use Mellotron choir for that, blending the real singers into that, so it became more quirky and more art. So it was bringing in some quirky almost sci-fi, space age, American soundtracks from the 50s, that kind of feel, Ed Wood feel to some of the music. So it was, I don't know why it happened, but the way the actors in that kind of barber killing scene, that is really fucked up. And it was so inspiring to do something really odd and go against and put some weird stuff. And it's really orchestrated, this barber killing, this long stretch before he goes out on the highway and kills himself. That section was really inspiring because it was so weird, and yeah, the way the dialogue is way off and and yeah.
But I also remember one of the early music sessions where it was like, then I think like you started like maybe putting in some more classical piano or like maybe some violin or something like that, and it was just like very clear that the instruments had to be kind of odd and like different, because it simply felt like this film was like one of its kind, and it kind of felt like if you went back and became too traditional, it felt out of place. So it really needed to have like all these special instruments. I also love the banjo in there, for example, the saw and like things like that, which like there's so many instruments that you like. Well, okay, sometimes they're used in soundtracks, but it's like it's not the usual soundtrack instruments, and I think that was incredibly important for the kind of the personality of the film.
I remember we tried to use strings, and it was conventional or just too normal or generic for this movie. When you go into generic sounds, it was okay. That's boring. This needs to be more obscure, more abstract. I don't know if it's answer your question.
I think we have, we have a question maybe from the online, or for you, Jesper?
No, it's from me actually.
Yeah, great.
It's actually you were referring some movies. I felt more referred to like Tarkovsky's Stalker and Kubrick's 2001, particularly the ending is very much like 2001. And I think in both of those films, the aliens, which are not really in the film, are acting like a sort of religious or God-playing sort of influence. And I was thinking, can you elaborate something about that? Because I was thinking several times that, by the way, brilliant scenes were like, that he's being abducted by aliens or something like that, or there's something playing into from the outside. But you were referring to some religious to Job's book. Is anything you could say about that?
I think we got that from your microphone, right, Jesper? I'm not going to repeat it then.
It's I don't know how to actually answer, but for me it's a metaphorical story. I mean, it's in a way, in the surface it's quite clear. I mean, there is this person and he seems to be under like the faith just starts to play with him. So he's losing everything, and one by one. So in a way, the eventual ending of the story is that he has to let everything go, and the last thing is the boy. So he has to let him go. I mean, and I don't think the scene where the boy goes, I mean, this is open to interpretation, but I don't think it's a scary scene. So he just needs to go there into the car for these reasons maybe we don't rationally understand. And then he has to cross the border, because that's also like eventually in this story you have to go there. So in a way it is a religious question in a way, because I think that like how I see life as a metaphor is that we have to get rid of everything, and we have to lose everything one by one. Or we have to get rid of, or we just have to let them go, because you cannot keep anything. And then we are going somewhere we don't know where we are going. So in a way, that's what happens to this person. And also, I mean, even though I use the book of Job because it has this same pattern, but I didn't want to do because I mean Book of Job is very, to me I understand why it is there, why we have the Book of Job, because we need some kind of answer to this question that why there is bad in the world, even though if there is God, like the people who wrote the Book of Job, they thought that we need this example story, that there is even the bad things happen, there is still reason behind that, and that's the trust in God. If you have the faith in God, then you have the answer in a way. But so I didn't have that. No. So it's existential, and that's why when it gets ambiguous. But it's still the same journey in a way. But I mean, I don't really want to. I mean, I cannot explain it more than this. But
well, I'm maybe not looking for an explanation. It's just like the references as
well.
Yeah. Because also, if you remember 2001, he's actually wearing a red spacesuit, and he looks actually.
I don't actually remember. I mean, I've seen the film obviously, but I don't remember the ending.
Oh, he comes into this room, which is apparently provided for by the aliens, and he just sees himself getting older. He looks over, and then he sees himself sitting and eating, being older, and then and it's a bit like this. He sees the persons. He come into this room from the past in a way. But that's good.
I think we're approaching 7 o'clock, but maybe we have time for one last short question from up there.
Okay, I have two technical questions. One is for the sound. Like in the example you showed, Peter, did you have like the music for the whole film before you made the sound, or was it a parallel development? Like in the example you described how you found the tone of the microwave to go along with the music. Was this the process of the whole film, or did you work on parallel tracks?
There's a question about the clip that we saw, if you had the finished or almost finished music beforehand, working on the scene and the sound, Peter, and maybe also in general.
Generally, we had like this almost finished music that we then could do the music for, or do the sounds for, sorry, so that they fit together in this tonality and rhythm and so that was generally how it was. And I mean, that's such a gift to have as a sound designer, because then you can really make everything come together.
And you had one more question?
Yeah, it's also short, technical.
Okay.
How long time did you use for the outdoor filming, like the recording? I mean, I guess you were pretty weather dependent, even though you feel that it's eternal winter in the film. It's not like that in the real world.
There's a question about how long time you spend on filming outdoors and the rough weather and all.
Well, we like altogether we had 31 shooting days, and I think it was roughly half were like interior and studio, and we shoot all of those first. We could use like studios in the south of Finland, but all the exteriors were shot in January, February in northern Finland, and yes, it is rough because it's like minus 35 was the coldest day, so that's kind of cold. But it's like, because I grew up in the north, so I know that the stages of winter are very different. Like at the moment we are in this when it's the most dark, and actually in the January still. And usually in January you have the most snow and the most cold, and the coldness you can see because then it's like glitters on the snow. And when you approach like late February starts the skiing season, which is like there's a lot of sun and it's kind of nice and it's a completely different vibe. So because of the looks, I wanted to have the midwinter in January. So. But that's really tough because it's so cold, and usually it's like all the skiing resorts are closed, even though it's midwinters, because it's simply too cold to go outside. But but not for us apparently. But I mean, but you were asking about the number of days, or?
Yeah, just because I mean, like you say, it's not like you could discover a month later, oh, I missed a scene, I need to go back. I mean, the weather would be completely different.
Oh yes, and also there's like this thing guess you could call the snow control, which is actually quite tricky, because there are some scenes that you have somebody walking in the snow, and I mean, you have a pristine, nice snow, you can find that, but once you do it once, it's gone. So we had like a prop team that they had to sprinkle the snow back, and that took like ages. But sometimes we just find another place to do another take, and it's actually very difficult. But yeah.
And how many cameras did you?
Only one camera, and this was shot on film, so 35 millimeter.
I think, yeah, very, very shortly, because we have to, yeah, very short question.
Okay. So you're talking a lot about, this is weird, and you wanted more abstract or looking for the weirdness. So how did you know that this kind of weird was your kind of weird? That you can be weirder? So how do you talk about, now it's too weird, or yeah?
As a question about weirdness and how you find, I guess, the balance. When is it too weird? When is your kind of weirdness?
That's actually a very good question. I don't think, but I think now to think of it, we didn't talk about like that so much, because I felt that like the scene you were talking about, the killing of the barber, like it inspired you because it felt a bit like a B movie, and this was exactly the tone I was after in a way. And I think also even the colors that were there were affecting the music, because I remember when I was watching it the first time, all this, because it has kind of bright colors in the suits and even in the ceilings and what the set designer had used. So we didn't. I think it's a good, if you don't have to talk about like is it too weird or not too weird, you just feel it. But it's also like we were on the same page. I think it's very important, because it could have been that maybe you are a composer who doesn't like at all this B-movie style and you want to make it, no, this is a killing scene, we have to make it very dramatic. Yeah. So then it would be kind of difficult. So I think it's something that you have to, if you talk about the music, like you said, like when you make the first sketches, it's also for you to check me out in a way. But do we understand each other? Are we, and we were talking a lot about like just not this film, but like music in general, like what do you like and what do I like?
And you were into psychedelic music from the 60s.
Yes.
That was a good one for me.
But it's really, I mean, this is a very good question, because I mean, I don't know how, you just have to trust your taste in a way. But it's a balancing thing, and because obviously you can go too far, and you can just, I think you have to be aware that you don't start to, so that it cannot be like an inside joke. That's very important. It always has to communicate something, because that's not interesting anymore if it goes to if it turns too much inside.
Thank you. I think I'd like to, just before we end, ask if any of you have anything that you would really like to share about the movie, about the collaboration, about any last thoughts or comments, or...
I think it's important for advice for composers to start early on to write the music, and I'm very fond of this kind of teamwork where you are, of course you're the director, you have the answer at last, but to inspire each other from very early stage is one of the, I'm really fond of that.
Yeah, and it opens up for being more experimental, because you don't need to kind of take the safe route. You can kind of do things where you try out things, and then sometimes you do things that are wrong, but then you move on. But I mean, quite often, like mistakes or things that, like what we also do sometimes is like, okay, there's a cue written for a specific moment, but what happens if we move that cue over there? And then suddenly something new appears, and it's kind of like, it's almost like an accident, but it's a creative accident that inspires you. And those kind of things happen if you
have the time
to do that and explore that. And then I must just say, like, working with a director who's very open-minded and who wants to explore what music and sound can do, but also has a very kind of unique vision for the film is like it's that kind of mixture is amazing.
But yeah, I really think the same. It's like really important to work on early on with the music. And I think like, because I'm a writer, if somebody would give me like a short story by Chekhov and say like, write something like this, it wouldn't be like a very good starting point for writing. And actually writing music is the same thing. You have to start from a scratch and actually do a creative process. And so don't no temp music anymore. And also I think it's that to be in a creative process, what does it actually mean? It's like, it's not like you know you just know that a direction you are going and you have to go there together. That's the whole thing. And then you can be playful because this is supposed to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's time to say thank you so much for the film, and thank you so much for sharing your creative process with us so generously. I've really appreciated that, and I think we all have. So thank you so much for coming here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.